Hi, Mom. I told you I was going to do this. For those of you who are not my mother, hi, I'm Jenny, and this is Generations True Crime. Little bit of an intro to me before we get started. We're going to jump right in and talk about the Lori Daybell appeals filing that she had for her Idaho trial. But wanted to give you a little background information. So, hi, I'm Jenny, and my mom and I are big true crime fans. And for a while now, we have been talking every single day. We talk about different cases, we talk about trials that we're watching. And she is now in the hospital, sadly, unfortunately, battling some cancer. That's okay. We have great hopes. But, in the meantime, she hasn't really been able to keep caught up on any of these trials and the stuff going on. So I thought I would record some fun videos so that she can like and subscribe, as should you, pretty please, because it's a lot of fun in here. We're pretty snarky, but we're just really into these fascinating characters and trials and cases. So with that, no further ado, let's get started talking about Lori. If you are new to this and don't know who Lori Daybell is, I do not know why in the world you would have clicked on this video, but maybe I'll do a different one at another time that's more like of a summary of everything, but there's way too much to try to summarize right now. So let's dig in. Mom, here's what happened. Now, of course, the trial is still going on. We know that. I'll do some summaries for you in a couple of days. But I wanted you to know about the appeals filing that she submitted that hit the docket. So this is from her Idaho case. And obviously, it takes a couple of years to get an appeal, right? I mean, the appeals process is started, but it takes a while to get through it. And it has finally hit the docket, and we get to see what she's trying to appeal on. So a couple things to note. They are not appealing on anything like evidence. It's all appealing based on the judicial process, which we kind of figured, right? Because it was so hokey and squirrely from the get-go. So I'm going to tell you about each little thing, each little listed bullet point of theirs, and then I'll talk a little more about what each one of them means. You're definitely going to hear some dogs walking around every now and then, usually a doggy door slamming shut. Maybe this microphone will keep that from happening, but you don't know. All right, so let's get started. So that appeals hit the docket. It took a couple of years. Obviously, we talked about how they're looking into the judicial process rather than the evidence itself. They're going to claim some errors that the judge made. The appellate lawyers are going to, and they're going to send that to the Idaho Supreme Court. And that apparently is going to take another couple of years too. So buckle up. But then the Supreme Court of Idaho will decide if the verdict stands or if she gets a new trial. I made notes, Mom. I can't keep track of stuff. All right. So here we go. Oh, also, I should mention, I'm definitely going to give my, share my opinions and thoughts and stuff. This is my first time. So thanks for bearing with me while it's a little weird. So first of all, the first argument is that the judge wouldn't let her choose her own attorney, Mark Means, to represent her. And the appellate lawyers are saying this is a violation of her Sixth Amendment right. Okay. Number two, they claim that she was deprived of her Sixth Amendment right to assistance of counsel. And again, I'll go more into this, but loosely, it's because the judge held some pretrial hearings with the state about disqualifying Mark Means, and Means wasn't allowed to participate in those. So ultimately, it comes down to then, therefore, in these hearings to dismiss him, Lori wasn't represented. Okay. Then number three, they claim that she was deprived of her 14th Amendment right to due process because while she was incompetent those 10 months, the state had hearings. Well, the state and the court had hearings that were to discuss her incompetence, and they feel like her rights were violated by holding those hearings. Like what they want them to do, wait on you? Girl, you cuckoo bananas. Number four, that the judge erred in allowing uncharged acts in Arizona into the Idaho trial. So in other words, they're saying, oh, well, you let these acts into this Idaho trial from things that happened in Arizona that she hasn't even been charged with. And they're saying they shouldn't have done that. Other words, you can't bring evidence that's related to other crimes into different trials unless there's overwhelming reason to do so. Stuff is so interesting. I should have gone to law school, Mom. And number five, that she was denied her motion to dismiss based on her right to have a speedy trial. That's a lot. So the theme of these five are that Lori did this to herself, right? We all know that. let's dig into it a little more. I'm sure, Mom, that you remember most of this, but maybe somebody who's watching doesn't know it already. First of all, this is so devious and calculated. It's almost like, we know she's not dumb. Like, she's not dumb. She's cuckoo bananas for sure. And she's, as whatever evil is, that's it. But she's not dumb. And I'm curious how much of this was so set in motion long before this, and that maybe she knew or she was trying to set up. I don't know. This just seems so freaking devious and calculated. Only one of these needs to be found correct, or only one of them needs to be agreed to by the state Supreme Court, and she'll get a new trial. Let's see which one you think that might be. So Mark Means was her first lawyer, right? And that was the lawyer of her choice. But the thing with Mark Means was he was originally defending Chad and Lori. And in defending them, because they were two co-defendants in the case against, them deleting the children and Chad's wife, we know that they had a split. Well, that split really started because Lori couldn't be found competent. So they had to send her, to the mental health facility or hospital or whatever it was to deem competency. And that took 10 months. And kind of during that time, she, obviously didn't really have representation. Your case isn't moving forward. It's on hold. So Chad, in the meantime, they did speak on the phone at some point. And I don't think this is while she was in the hospital, but at some point they spoke on the phone, and he said, yeah, Mark Means is going to represent both of us to a degree or to an extent. I don't know the exact verbiage he used, but it was kind of an interesting thing. It makes me wonder, was he trying to tell her, yeah, he's kind of representing us both, but maybe not you so much. Anyway, he was paying for him. I didn't even know that, but I guess that does make sense because he got a bunch of insurance money. I digress. So during this time, Chad decides, never mind, he's going to go with John Pryor, which kind of leaves Lori in this limbo, right? She gets out and is found competent. And now she starts demanding this speedy trial. We're super familiar with it. I want my speedy trial. That's why things have gone the way they've gone. I think this was a pretty smart move, to be honest, because with how convoluted that case was, your best bet, in my opinion, is to move it as quickly to the table, to the, to court as possible, because then the state really doesn't have a chance to develop its case and get its witnesses and really have a good, strong case to prove guilt. So again, I don't think she's a dummy. I think that was a pretty smart move, actually. Now it starts to get a little convoluted in this regard, in that Mark Means seemed to really fight for his opportunity to represent her and be her lawyer. Even though in other things that I read, and when I read it in different ways, it seemed like he wasn't so much. He was just trying to defend Chad. So I don't really know. But again, this is a little bit convoluted here. The state had to disqualify and remove him as her attorney. And from what I can tell, he really seemed to want to stay on as that. So I find that really interesting. Were they going to split those cases anyway? With Chad going to John Pryor, was Mark going to try to, I do not know. Maybe Mark just really wanted his time to do this case because, it was such a high profile case, right? So what I'm getting out of this is that when they were split, that's when she went scorched earth. She just went nutty, cuckoo bananas. Obviously the 10 months to competency, then the sudden obsession with this speedy trial. Again, I think that was pretty smart. So here's another interesting tidbit. While Lori is in the hospital, she spoke with a clinician there. And I think maybe this clinician was LDS, because this clinician actually advised that she reach out to the LDS church and ask them for paid representation, that might be something the LDS church would provide. Now, obviously, I don't think that's what happened. It's not what happened. She got a public defender. But she does call them. She calls the LDS church. And the person she speaks with gives the information to the prosecutor. So she's called to speak with an attorney and say, hey, here's who I am, here's what's going on, whatever. And that person not only does not represent her, they call the prosecutor and give them information. I believe that is going to be part of that first amendment, or that first kind of bullet point that they made I know that there's a correct word for what those are called. The filings, maybe. I don't remember. I actually used to work for my husband, who was a criminal defense attorney. I don't remember everything. I've slept since then. So number 2, let's talk competency. She fought for her right to this speedy trial, right? And as soon as she regained competency. And I think a part of that speedy trial was to avoid the death penalty as well, which I think we all kind of figured that. And then they had to continue because if you recall, they ended up evaluating for competency again. I think it was only like 9 days or something like that. But they found her competent. But by the time that they did with that second one, to reschedule the trial was going to put them about, I think it was like 90 days outside of like kind of that time limit for speedy trial. So it makes me curious if that was a strategy. That second competency hearing, right? That again was a short bit of time. It was right before the trial was supposed to start and it pushed the trial back. Did she do that in order to create that problem with the trial now going past what her speedy trial rights were supposed to be? Do you see what I'm saying? Do you feel me? Is she that crafty? I think she's pretty crafty. And I think she's smarter than anybody gives her credit for. She comes off like she's soft and dingy, but she's a lot smarter than anybody gives her credit for. Number 3, let's talk about the bad acts. That's the one where they said that I believe it was her 14th Amendment right. Let's look. 14th Amendment right to due process. Wait, that would have had to been, yeah, no, this is number 4. Somewhere I skipped one. Listen, just go with it. These bad acts. So these were things like the evidence of Charles's death, other crimes like the attempted unaliving of Brandon Boudreaux. And they threatened to introduce those at the last minute with that Idaho trial. And it wouldn't have given her enough time to gather a defense for it. So now the claim is, you guys kind of snuck that on me. You threw that in my lap in order for me to not get to defend myself. And because of that evidence dump that the state did, that's when they took the death penalty off the table. So see, I think she's got it going on up here more than we know. So what does this all mean? And do I think she has any potential here with this appeal? Well, I'm not a lawyer. I worked for one briefly. He was in criminal defense, but that does not mean I know anything about the appellate process or really very much about the criminal defense process. I know enough to make me dangerous. Like I said, I definitely think she's crafty. I think that a big part of what she's doing now and really showing out in this newest case, she keeps talking about this 403, 404, and that's something that gets brought up in here is these bad acts, right? That she's appealing on in Idaho. That's where I think she's really getting kind of some fuel for the fire in this. Obviously, she was going to know anyway because the state had addressed it in the Arizona trial, this new one with her Brandon Boudreaux attempted deletion. She knows that, but I think the more she's read into it, I feel like at this point she is trying to push for the 403B, which is when the state will bring in those bad acts. Remember, she talks about, I'm this wonderful, loving person, and I love everybody, and I'm great. And the state comes back with, hey, if you're going to talk about your character, we're going to rebut it. And that can include bringing in bad acts. I really think she wants to push that because she's seen that it's a reason for appeal. And before, where you would think she wouldn't want those bad acts brought in, I think that now she's more along the lines of, oh, wait a second, if that becomes an appellate issue, then sure, let them. Because if that happens, it can potentially jack the other cases. If you come in and say, well, this bad act was brought up and now there's an appeal on that, will it kind of snowball or domino effect into all the other ones? So I do think she's trying to play a pretty crafty game with this. I wanted to keep this one a little short for you, Mom. First time, get your thoughts, see what you think. And of course, anybody else watching. But I would love to kind of do a review and breakdown of what's happened in the trial so far, because I know you kind of been out of it. And I think you should know what's going on. And I should be the one to tell it to you, because this is what we do. We get together for the hot goss about these crazy, fascinating criminals. If you're not my mom and you have enjoyed this or think you might be willing to hang in there with me while I set up a little better and grow at this and get better, I would absolutely love that. Give me a like, give me a subscribe, give it a share. And if not, that's okay too. I'm just glad you were here and stuck it out with me. Mama, I love you so much, and I will see you very, very soon.